Broad Street Review podcast, Philly's online hub for arts, culture, and commentary, where art and ideas meet. I am your host, Darnell Radford. On today's podcast, Richard Chan and Bijan No talk about Interact Theater Company's production of The Great Leap by Lauren Yee, the aftermath of The Great Leap Forward, and the Cultural Revolution. Lay the foundation for a rival basketball game 18 years in the making. Here's my interview with Richard Chan and Bijan No. Stay tuned. Always in familiar places. Today I'm at the Drake. I'm at the proscenium at the Drake, here with Interact Theater Company, and we're here to talk about The Great Leap. And I have two members of the cast here, and I will have them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Bijan No, playing Connie.
And I'm Richard Chan, playing Manfred Lum.
Welcome to Rep Radio.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Richard, welcome to Rep Radio. So I always take the opportunity to have sort of a noob kind of tell us a little bit about themselves. So Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an actor. I'm also a martial artist. I'm based here in Philadelphia.
You're an actor? Really?
Yes. Yeah. So.
And a martial artist.
And I'm actually a transplant from Virginia. Mm-hmm. And I've been in Philly for the past 5-6 years, somewhere around there.
Cool. How long have you been studying martial arts?
Around the same time.
Oh, okay.
I started when I came to Philly.
Nice. And what was the deciding reason that when you got here to do it?
Well, I did a little bit of research, and the martial art that I wanted to do is Wing Chun Kung Fu, and I found a really good school here in Philly, so if you want to check it out, it's in Chinatown. And after that, I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn self-defense, and I'm going to sharpen my mind and my body.
Yeah, so no sneaking up on Richard. All right, so let's talk about The Great Leap. Who wants to tell me about it?
Well, Richard, you can start since you are playing the principal of Manfred Lum.
The Great Leap. Oh, man, where to begin? On the surface level is a story about a Chinese-American basketball player in high school who is he's willing his way into this college team to play in Beijing. And, of course, it's also a story about two coaches who after meeting each other to meet again 18 years later. And their misunderstandings, their differences, and communication issues with all characters. I don't know, is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give away too much. But I think on a grander scale, it's also about being American-born Chinese, being kind of a third culture citizen of the world, you know, which is what I am in real life, American-born, but with Asian immigrant parents, and Richard, you too.
Yes,
right?
Same here.
And so we kind of both possess like an experience of belonging to two different cultures and therefore being like a third culture person. So Lauren Yee, who's the playwright of Great Leap, really nails this really well with our characters, who are San Francisco, American-born, Chinese, who, seek to understand, like for my character, Connie, she's studying Asian American studies in grad school, and she's really striving to gain access to her Chineseness through her academic studies. Richard's character, Manfred, experiences this by actually going to China, even though his character hasn't expressed an interest in learning anything about Chinese culture from the background of the play. But on a deeper level too, it's about what it means to have the freedoms we have in the U.S. and what it means to live in a society where those freedoms are suppressed. And I think their issues, even though the play takes place in 1971 and 1989, two different time periods. The topics that are addressed in the stories of these characters' lives really, really resonates with what we're going through on a global level today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There have been many conversations, I think, over the last 20 years about sort of like knowing where you came from and going back to your roots. But within the past maybe 3 to 5 years, I would say in media, there's been more of a focus of characters who are trying to maintain this balance, like especially if you are American born, but your parents came from another country, and so maybe in the household there is this traditional culture that is still being carried on, and but you're out in the world learning everything brand new and kind of trying to balance the two, where you are and where you're born and where you come from as a, for your culture altogether. And so I wanted to ask the two of you, like, what sort of, did you find a struggle sort of being familiar with your family lines past, in terms of like just trying to wade through everything that's being thrown at you today?
Well, we're Americans.
Yes.
And I think that's what America's grappling with, has constantly grappled with, that there's a differentiation and a need to categorize people or identify. But, I'm born and raised also Virginian, like Richard. Actually, I was born in D.C., raised in Virginia. I do think that the identity play has existed for a long time. Now it's blowing up in terms of an Asian American landscape because, we look at all the waves of immigration that took place since probably, you look at Chinese immigration, that took place with the railroads and before, right? So we're looking at like 1800s U.S. But then you look at all the immigration that took place with with the different wars that took place on Asian continent or Asian countries. Yeah. And so it really is this recent, in terms of the past 100 years of or even past 50 years, when we look at Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and then Cambodia, Laotian, all the different Asian immigrants and refugees who came here. It was rare to have first generation Asian Americans go into the arts. So we're starting to see, I think, people who are in their 30s and beyond, like me, start creating identity pieces written by and for American Asian-born, American Asian identifying actors and stories. So we get Lauren Yee, we get Queen Nguyen, we get
Crazy Rich Asians. You get Always Be My Maybe.
Well, I'm talking about playwrights even.
Yes.
The Michael Liu, the Rihanna Mirza, the Lauren Yee, the Queen Nguyen, and I'm leaving out a whole bunch. Yeah. But we're starting to see more of those stories. And even here at Interact, this is my 7th show here. And it wasn't until recent years, probably starting from COT, that we started finding these stories that were Asian stories and political and had a cast that included more than one person that was supposed to be Asian.
Yeah.
So
what were your first impressions about The Great Leap?
Well, for me, obviously, it's basketball and how it's related in this play, and the pacing and the rhythm and everything that comes with it. And of course, as I learned, even myself early on, I was like, I didn't know that basketball was something that the Communist Party kept around. And I was like, wow, even I don't know that. And of course, I'm really young, and the first kind of Chinese basketball player that I think of is Yao Ming. And but also another thing is, since it leads to The Great Leap, one of my family members was actually in China, and he actually my grandfather, and he was also purged during the Cultural Revolution, and he experienced all these things, and to be able to see in an art form that's not from him, that is it was eye-opening.
Yeah. How much, for both of you, how much did you know about the Great Leap Forward before this piece and the Cultural Revolution? Because I was thinking about it and I was like, the time frames, first of all, I was, in '89 where this piece primarily sits. I was 9 years old. So I don't know what my focus was, but it wasn't on, it wasn't necessarily on world cultures. Because I guess at the time I'm just starting to pay attention I'm looking at the news saying like, I'm sure there's cartoon on, we could be watching, because I was too young at the time. But how much of that did you know already?
Well, Richard and I have had a lot of conversations about this in rehearsal and outside of it. And I guess I'll go first and then you, because I think you have a deeper connection because you are Chinese and your parents and grandparents have a lot of connection. But my parents came out, escaped Saigon with the fall of the Vietnam War, the end of Vietnam War. And so my father was a staunch anti-communist, pro-democracy writer, philosopher, and activist. So in '89, I was a kid also, living in Virginia, watching TV with my parents, but they were very fixated on the news about Tiananmen Square, so I'll name it.
Yeah.
Because so much of this fight for democracy and for human rights and for freedom of expression deeply resonated with them, having escaped a country that fell to communism. Yeah. So we were riveted by it, and it was deeply affecting and impacting for our family.
For me, I've always been very interested in the history of China and like everything that goes on over there, because it was where my parents come from. Granted, my father was raised in Hong Kong, but nonetheless, he was born in China. And but my mom and dad, they actually kind of represent these two dichotomies of what happened, the aftermath of the Chinese Civil War, whereas my father's family left, just got out into Hong Kong, and then my mom's family was more of the people who supported the revolution, and not the revolution, the Chinese Civil War, of the other side of the outcome, which is the People's Republic of China. So I would hear a lot of stories when I was younger from my mom, from my grandparents, about like what has happened then and what they had to do, and it was troubling, because you think, when you hear this stuff, it's like, no way, that wouldn't have happened. Yeah. But it happened. And these are witnesses to they have first person account of what happened. And reading the text, like learning it as an American is also very different, because I don't have the connection to that. And then I also hear from history teachers how they teach it. But to answer the question, I hear it from my parents, like my mom, and I hear it from my grandparents, and also my aunts and uncles as well. Yeah. Those who stayed on the mainland.
Yeah.
Chinese people who are on one side, and there are Chinese people who are on another. And there's
then
also,
you find out it's so layered too. I mean, from my position, I'm not attached to it at all, because I didn't live it and I didn't experience it. So what I'm getting is this information that's kind of like, how do I sort of encapsulate all of this so that you can have a general understanding of it and not necessarily have more or less of either position, to just in general understand what happened in a period. So those are always interesting conversations, especially when we're having them on stage. And I think it's really great when the piece can actually give us some insight on more than just one particular view, instead of saying like, oh, this writer was obviously opposed to this whole thing, or this writer, picked one side of it and decided to, steer us in that direction.
I think Interact actually, over the years, has done a really good job of finding plays that do ask the difficult questions and ask us to imagine the multifaceted decisions that characters have to make, the complexities of their life choices that pit them against one another in politics or in social issues. So this piece, I think, in seeing the American-born Chinese characters that are younger in '89, and then someone like Justin's character, Wang Cheng, who is a product of the Great Leap and having tough decisions he has to make because of being embedded in that society and trying to like just survive and then succeed.
Yeah.
I think it allows us to see that all of these big world issues actually distill down to very personal choices.
And understanding it was so much, there's so much more to it than we might have thought. I thought it was great to have more information about Wang Cheng's, past, to give that kind of understanding, because we didn't, we're all sitting here in the U.S., so we're still looking at it in that direction, but not really understanding. But I feel like towards the end, I said, wow, this would have been a tough spot for anybody, of course, and then to add this layer of humor and this energy that your character Manford presents, and Saul, who's played by Scott Greer. It's just kind of like, there's a part of me that's thinking like, ooh, I wonder if there's someone saying like, we can't make fun of that. Like, the piece isn't making fun of this. The piece is taking this situation, which we're looking at as kind of humorous, but the foundation of this is a very like tough and terrible situation, a history that we're, appearing into. So I was kind of relieved to know that there were moments where we could sort of laugh and enjoy the piece as a whole, and not necessarily be so so focused on like a history lesson.
I think that's the strength of, again, the playwright,
Yeah.
Lauren Yee. Just like providing this framework of like a basketball, adventure.
Yeah.
Right? And then even the rhythm of it is very much a play-by-play, almost like you're on the court. And so it sets us up for like this like forward momentum that's also really fun and light. And so when you drop in the heavy ideas, you don't sink into them and rest with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were or are your relationship to basketball? How much? What did you know about it ahead of time? Are you a player? Were you last picked, or what?
Well, growing up, I didn't play as much as my brother did, but my brother played a lot, and sometimes I would play with him. And granted, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, so it's not like there's a Chinatown community.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, once my cousins moved over from China, like immigrated over, we started playing a little bit. But of course, I got older and I started going to college, and I had to focus on my studies. But my brother kept playing, and my cousins also kept playing too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basketball was part of a family thing, but maybe for me, not so much, because I was older than the rest. So
Yeah. I thought I was definitely wondering how a theater piece would handle basketball, and that's where the the elements of design sort of play in very well here. And there were definitely these moments where I guess as an audience we were expecting to see some, I don't know what we were expecting to see, but the way it changed with lighting, we all just kind of laugh, because it's just sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, because we're thinking about the height in here. There's so much like
The lights.
Yeah,
Not hitting them.
this is a basketball court, but we've been in here before when it wasn't a basketball court. So to see it in here, we're like, I wonder how much of the game we're gonna actually experience. But I did like those elements and like how it had played around. But handling a ball is not the easiest thing to do if you're not, in general, a basketball player. So what sort of preparation do you have to do for that to make sure this ball doesn't end up in the third row?
Well, I come in early before the show and I practice. Before the show, like rehearsals even started, I was practicing. I played like 2 pickup games actually.
Oh.
And I learned about how basketball, just like martial arts, very similar. It's all up in your face.
Yeah.
And it's all about taking your space. It's all about like not backing down. And it's
Learn
also
trash talking.
yeah. And the teamwork and the camaraderie, it was very eye-opening. I mean, I play with my family, but it's not the same way. But all of a sudden I'm playing against these people who also have a team of their own, and they're like yelling back and forth, and I was like sweating up in here, and like, I mean, a lot of those games really taught me a lot. And then on top of that, I learned a lot of dribbling. I practiced with some of my Kung Fu brothers who also play basketball. So yeah, I did a lot of that before I came in here.
Yeah.
And then being in this cast is kind of like being on a really fun athletic team.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot, like, because of the language and how much we pick up and reuse each other's words throughout the piece into like the last like big moment. I feel like there's a passing of the ball that happens a lot between the actors, and with Tom, our stage manager, who's calling all these crazy cues, you know. So it really does feel like rehearsal was like practice for a game.
Yeah. The character of Saul is a handful. To hear some of the things that he says, you know, it's like, I guess, you know, once upon a time before you know, the thought process became much more weighty. I guess it was sort of like shop talk.
Well, I mean, this was definitely, you know, having lived through the 80s, and I was like 9 or 10 in 89 also. You know, we talked about this in rehearsal. This was like very accurate of the casual racism that existed.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I remember people just like being my neighbors, being like the nicest people in the world, but just casually saying these remarks that were so hurtful.
Yeah.
And at the time, because, you know, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me around, and because the idea was, okay, if you just take it quietly and just press on with your own thing, you'll grow up and shed all of this around you. But don't say anything to piss off anyone, because we just have to assimilate and succeed.
Yeah.
You know, and nowadays, I wouldn't ever stand for that kind of language that comes out of a character like Saul's mouth. But I think in the 70s and in the 80s, he was still a good guy.
Yeah.
And he said horribly offensive shit.
So there's a lot of conversation had around this piece. And one of the things I thought about before I had the opportunity to sit in and experience the piece was what sort of prep would an audience need? Like, what sort of information would they need to understand? And I was, again, pleasantly surprised that we didn't need a whole lot of history and, you know, knowledge of it to really understand what was going on in the story as well. Because, you know, the Great Leap and the Cultural Revolution was the foundation of what's going on, and not necessarily we're going, what?
But I think
With
a good piece of theater or any story
does a good job.
Yeah, you should never have to have background knowledge to see something.
It's always a weird question when I ask that, but I feel like I just want it on the record that there is no prerequisite for coming in and experiencing a piece, because I think there are people out there who will hear the topic of a production and say, "Oh, I can't. That one's too deep for me," or something. Like, is it? No, you should come experience it. Like, it may not. You may be pleasantly surprised. It may not be what you thought. So I like sort of reminding people that you do not need any sort of previous anything before you come in here and experience this. But
Oh, I was just going to say, Richard, do you want to say anything to that? Because I don't want to.
Just bring yourself. Please, just come. Yeah, that's all you need. Just yeah.
What? So now we're in the run. You guys are all comfortable with this now. What have been some of the audience responses from the piece? Have you had an opportunity to sit in any of the discussions and chat with some people in the lobby?
I have a friend of mine who came to see the show, and she is going back to the mainland, and she came to see the piece, and without giving it away, basically she was pleasantly surprised, and she witnessed something that's something that her parents have told her before. And I thought that was very interesting, that because at first I was like, oh, well, maybe she wouldn't know anything about this, and I wonder if we are showing something that is new, but it looks like it's not new.
Yeah.
And it is something that she thoroughly enjoyed and also had things to think about too.
Yeah.
So
I think for, the people I've talked to who aren't necessarily, Chinese identifying, for them this piece resonates because we can so easily imagine countries today undergoing oppressive regimes, and this isn't the idea of students protesting in order to maintain or in order to get their freedom to express what they want, to fight for human rights, to criticize the government. I think it's a really real issue that we're seeing from within our own country here in the U.S. to countries in South America, to countries in Eastern Europe, you look around the globe right now, and this is not new. Yeah. So what's awesome about looking at this recent history that Lauren Yee is presenting in this play is that it's near enough that we know people who have experienced it in some way, like our parents or grandparents or friends, and then also what we're going through politically, and I won't say too much, I think resonates with a lot of audience members.
Yeah. What stands out for you that you'll take away the most? Whether it's validation of stories you've been told, or just particular moments where you're I had no idea and now I know, and it was through this piece that I learned it.
I guess I do have to say, the validation of my experiences coupled with the experiences of my family, and the piece explores both of those worlds, especially with my character being Chinese American, but also going somewhere and facing an entirely different kind of culture, and it's interesting because I've been there before, and I've visited China before, and I've been to Hong Kong, and the piece kind of revisits that for me.
The Great Leap. It's on stage. If you're listening to it right now, you should be on the website buying tickets, and you should buy 2 because theater is more fun with a +1.
Thank you, Darnell.
Richard and B, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about The Great Leap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com and click Get Involved at the top. While you're there, help keep us running and click Contribute to find out how. Connect with us on social media, on Facebook and Twitter at Broad Street Review. Thank you for helping to keep the conversation going.